So, if you're watching this devotional on the day that we are sharing it, you're watching it on December 21st, which is the winter solstice. It's also the shortest day of the year, or if you look at it another way, it's the longest night. And every year on this day, on the longest night, the shortest day, the longest night, the longest period of darkness, we pause in the middle of all that we're doing in Christmas at our church to offer what we call a service of the longest night. Now, some of you, if you're not a part of our church, you might be doing the same thing in your church. It's become kind of a new tradition, I think, in the most recent years. But it's to acknowledge the fact that for many, even though we call this the most wonderful time of the year, for some it's a time of struggle. It could be that it's this time of year that you become very aware of the fact that there is someone who is no longer with you, a spouse, another family member, a child, a parent, someone that you've lost in that past year or years ago. And it's somehow this is the time of year when that memory becomes so strong. You know, for others, it may just be a time where you're facing financial struggles. Maybe you've lost a job, something like that, that makes this time a difficult time when everyone is enjoying the festivities and we're seeing all the things about buying presents. You know, for some, it's maybe because there's a health issue that's going on and you're really struggling with that. And so in the midst of Christmas, in the midst of this celebration, we acknowledge that for some it's a difficult time, and yet at the same time, that was the place and time in which God met us. The passage of Scripture that I often begin Advent with is Isaiah 9, and verse 2, I think, sums it up so well. The people who walk in darkness have seen a great light. Those who lived in the land of deep darkness, on them light has shined. You see, that's the reality of this time of year, that we recognize the coming of light in the midst of darkness. And for some of you, that is the experience right now. You want to see that hope, that light that is to come, but you know too that your experience is so difficult. Well, at the end of our service of Longest Night, we often, or always, I guess I should say, we end our service with a hymn. The hymn that is called, the more formal name is When Peace Like a River, but it's also known as the hymn It Is Well. And we always end the service with that hymn. But some of you may or may not know the story that's behind that hymn. And it's a profound story, and it's one, I think, that speaks exactly to this moment of experiencing darkness, but also looking for light. So forgive me as I read this story so that you know what this hymn is all about. The event of great tragedy is associated with the writing of this hymn. Its author, Horatio G. Spafford, was a Chicago lawyer, a Presbyterian elder, and a respected friend of some prominent evangelists of the time. In the year 1873, Spafford's wife and their 4 daughters were advised by their family physician to take a trip to Europe, primarily to improve the state of Anne Spafford, that was Horatio's wife, to improve her health. Unexpectedly, though, business matters forced Spafford to postpone his own departure, but his wife and daughters went on their scheduled departure that went from the harbor of New York to France. They left that harbor on November 15th of that year, and tragically, about halfway across the Atlantic Ocean, their ship collided with another ship, and their ship sank quickly. It sank in less than 12 minutes. In fact, the account says that the ship was nearly split in two. All four of Horatio and Anne's daughters were killed, but somehow miraculously, Mrs. Spafford was saved. On December 1st, she, along with the other survivors, arrived in France, and Miss Spafford sent a message to her husband, and that message read, "Saved alone, what shall I do?" Imagine getting that kind of correspondence. You know, later, fellow survivor, a pastor by the name of Nason Weiss, wrote that Anna Spafford said to him in that moment, "God gave me 4 daughters, and now they have been taken from me. Someday I'll understand why." Well, for his part, Horatio, as soon as he heard what had happened and received that message, he himself got on a ship and made his way to be reunited with his grieving wife, who was also in the midst of terrible grief. It's said that somewhere along the way, perhaps right about as they crossed over the place where that ship had gone down, that was where Horatio wrote the words to that hymn. In the midst of his going over that place of extreme tragedy, extreme loss, that's where he wrote the words of this hymn. "When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to know, it is well with my soul." What kind of faith does it take to write those words? What kind of courage does it take to imagine the face of God and say, "I'm going through this terrible time, this extreme place of loss, but it is well with my soul"? I tell you, I read that story and I wasn't sure if I could be in that same place that Horatio Spafford was when he wrote those words. But it also made me think of this. I may not be going through that right now, but someone else may be. Someone else may be going through a similar kind of struggle, a similar time of worry, right here in the midst of all the beautiful lights, all the wonderful carols, all the parties, all the celebration, all the gift giving. Somebody that I know or that I don't know may be going through the most difficult time in their life. And so maybe now is the time that we pause and we offer up a prayer. And we ask God to send that message. Although I'm going through this, it is well. It is well with my soul, because God will see me through.